सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen though.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Just about 3 years back, that one issue had parts of Delhi on fire, in fact, large parts of eastern Delhi on fire. It had also set similar fires in parts of UP, other parts of the country. Also, there was a lot of protests in Assam and the Northeast as a result. And as you may have figured, this is about the CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019. This law was passed in December 2019. So I will list for you, some of it will be by way of revision of what we might have said. You know what? When there is a chapter you might have read 3 years back, a revision is called for. So we had many episodes of Cut the Clutter talking about this issue and its manifestations, but there were 3 specific ones early on. About 3 years back, around time this was becoming a big issue. And those are episodes number 323, 342, and 360. And I'm sharing links to all 3 with you. Now, these episodes explain the intricacies of the issue. The court now has already defined the questions and the areas which it wants to go into. So what's the basic issue there? The basic issue, if you remember correctly, or let me remind you, there were different elements here. One is CAA. What does CAA do? CAA basically says, first of all, remember, CAA is not about anybody who comes into India now. CAA is also not about anybody who came into India in last 8 years. CAA is about anybody who came into India until December 31, 2014 and is seen to be an illegal foreigner in India, can be of any faith. There, among those illegal foreigners who came in till December 31, 2014, and I'm emphasizing it for a reason, which I'm sure you also know by now because this has been discussed so much, then you figure out who's come from where. If for all those who've come from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, for all those who are Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Parsis, etc., anybody but Muslims, they will be given Indian citizenship. That is Citizenship Amendment Act. Now, that is one aspect of it. Now, why would that lead to a situation where Muslims who live in India start worrying? So while there is an argument, and that argument is in the Supreme Court now, that can India, where Article 14 gives equality before law to everybody, and there is nothing in our constitution that can define or give, that can either define somebody's citizenship based on a faith or grant or take away or deny citizenship to somebody on the grounds of faith or ethnicity or any grounds of identity. That is the one principal issue. But the other issue also is, and that led to these big protests, was that it was said at that point that 2 more things will happen. One, a national population register will be set up. Now, a national population register, as we've been saying, is a good idea because every country must have a national population register. The last time we did something like that was in 1951. That actually was an NRC, a National Register of Citizens, and that had come following in the wake of partition, because lots of people had left India and gone to what was then combined Pakistan, East and West. A lot of people had left Pakistan and come to India. So a lot of Hindus and Sikhs, essentially, some Christians, Parsis, had come into India, and lots of Muslims had gone from India into the 2 sides of Pakistan. So a kind of national register of citizens was made out in 1951. So that is the first cutoff date, or that is the first crucial date. But India has never really built a national population register. So Once again, enumerators go to everybody. It can happen during the census, which unfortunately has been delayed. Decennial census, which was due in 2021, was delayed on the grounds that there was the pandemic. And now, even in 2022, you see no signs of this being resumed, the process being resumed, which is sort of disappointing. But the fact is that if you have enumeration in a census, people can go to people's homes and say, all right, so you now live in India. How long have you been living in India for, etc., etc. That's the National Population Register. Remember, National Population Register only lists who's living in India. It does not confer citizenship on you. But the plan that was now put forward, that said National Population Register will ask you who your parents were, and if they came in from outside India, where were they born? In which village were they born? When were they born? In which faith were they born? Where did they come from? If they came from another country, where did they come from? And that's where it got complicated. And then after Amit Shah, the Home Minister, made this statement in West Bengal, that was in the run-up of the West Bengal elections, was that statement for just a few seconds.
और जहां तक एनआरसी का सवाल है, दीदी कह रही है कि हम एनआरसी नहीं होने देंगे। मैं आपको कहता हूं कि हिंदुस्तान में एक भी घुसपैठियों को हम रहने नहीं देंगे, चुन चुन कर बाहर निकालेंगे।
So as you watch that statement, just for a few seconds, we showed you a clip. He talked about the NRC. So an NPR and then NRC. And he said an NRC will take place all over the country. So what that means is that all over the country, every citizen, at least that was the proposition then, although Narendra Modi, Prime Minister, later in his speech at Ramlila ground, said that no NRC plan has been drawn up. It hasn't come to cabinet. Nobody has cleared it. There is no law passed. So what's this excitement about? So the fact is that there was a backdrop to the NRC because an NRC process had been carried out in Assam. Now I have to take a deep breath here and sort of regroup my thoughts because you might be finding it's getting cluttered already. But the fact is, it was always meant to be cluttered. And this law, as it came in, was not meant to declutter the situation. This was only meant to clutter it further, particularly as it was mentioned along with the NRC. So what does NRC do? NRC can pick up data, say from NPR, if you do an NPR process, and then say, oh, so your parents came from outside India, right? Where did they come from? What evidence do you have? Who came from where, etc., etc. And then, if it establishes that you were not a citizen of India or your parents were not citizens of India, this can then say, all right, so tell us what faith you are. Now, if you are any faith but Muslim, and if your ancestors or parents are more relevant than maybe grandparents or great-grandparents, if they had come from any of these three countries, that is Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, then you will get automatic citizenship. But if you are a Muslim, then you will have to go through the normal process of applying for citizenship, etc., etc. And then I suspect you will have to be someone as important and has as high profile as Adnan Sami to get Government of India to give you Indian citizenship. So that was the problem. Now the backdrop here was Assam. Assam has a peculiar history. India has had several stages of migration between India and what was Pakistan to begin with, and what then became West Pakistan and East Pakistan. So until 1951, there was heavy migration as an active exchange of population took place between both sides. Between 1951 and say 1965, a steady migration was taking place. Muslims were coming into Pakistan from the Indian side, and a lot of Hindus and Sikhs were coming into India from the Pakistan side. That is both West Pakistan and East Pakistan. Just for clarity, it's an example I use often. Asif Iqbal, who later became Pakistan's cricket captain, he used to play for Hyderabad in Ranji Trophy in India. And he left for Pakistan quite late in life, maybe very early 60s or late 50s, and then went on to captain Pakistan. So this migration was going on. After the war in 65, this migration stopped. And that is why you see that other contentious thing that keeps coming up again and again, and I will not go deep into that today. That is the Enemy Properties Act. Because both countries then say that, all right, after 1947, families went from this side to the other. The families who went from India to Pakistan or Pakistan to India left their assets behind. Those assets were taken by the government and handed over to those who came in from the other side, leaving their assets behind. So there was an exchange of population. There was also an exchange of assets. But what to do with families which did not migrate fully? In the Indian context, Muslim family. So half the family migrated, or one generation migrated to Pakistan, one generation stayed back. So what do you do with properties that generation that migrated to Pakistan left behind? So that's why Enemy Properties Act was invoked, in fact, by UPA. And after that, it went into cold storage. So partition, migration, exchange of population is a very complex issue in the subcontinent. Now, what is the government saying with this law? Government is saying, look, we are not denying citizenship to anybody. We are not checking with any Indian Muslim whether you are an Indian citizen or not. This is inclusionary. We are only trying to include those members of the minorities in their countries, that is 3 specific countries, Bangladesh, Pakistan and Afghanistan, who might have faced discrimination because they were the minorities there. And we are just being inclusive, giving them easy Indian citizenship. On the other hand, the critics would say, no, it is not inclusionary, it is actually exclusionary. Because one, you are saying that this facility, in any case, if it's such a generous idea to protect minorities who might suffer from persecution elsewhere, why limit it to minorities in these 3 countries? What about a Hindu or a Sikh or a Parsi or whoever who might face discrimination, say in America or Russia or China or anywhere? Further on, how do you decide then, once you say that somebody was persecuted, how do you only give this privilege or accord this privilege only to those persecuted from non-Muslim faiths? How can you determine this on basis of religion? So that is the essential challenge. Is it inclusionary? Is it exclusionary? But what it isn't an instrument that gives citizenship to any Sikhs that come in from Afghanistan now, or any Hindus that might come in from Pakistan now as they keep coming in, or any Hindus that might come in from Bangladesh now, because the cutoff date, remember very clearly, the cutoff date is December 31, 2014. I'm re-emphasizing this because very often when the stories of atrocities or victimization of Hindus and Sikhs, etc. come up out of Pakistan in particular, people say, see, that's why CAA is needed. CAA will do nothing for them. At least the CAA as it exists today can do nothing for them. CAA is not a time machine that somebody who comes in now, CAA will position them back before December 31, 2014. That cannot happen. So we have to separate politics from the law. Now, Supreme Court will look at this issue, and I'm glad, and we should all be grateful, that Chief Justice Lalit has listed it for October 31. Also, the court has now sort of formulated the question. So, Article 14 of our Constitution gives each citizen the right to be treated as an equal by law. Which means just because somebody is Muslim, Hindu, Jat, Dalit, Thakur, Brahmin, tribal, non-tribal, all that doesn't matter. Everybody gets equal treatment before the law. But there are cases in which the government might be able to justify differential treatment. In those cases, the judiciary has already set a very clear principle, and judiciary uses sort of complex language. I will try and simplify it for you. So judiciary says that if you want to make a distinction for treatment under law for any category, that categorization should be based on intelligible differentia. What that means is that the reasons why you make a category under the law to have different treatment, there should be good reasons for making that category. The second thing the court has said, the judiciary has said is, the second part of the same test is that this differentia or this distinction that you've made, all right, it's a good way, you've used a good way, you have the justification to put certain people in one category to get different treatment under the law. But even that treatment should be in pursuit of the basic objective of the law. So that is something on which, again, critics are challenging this law, because they're saying if the idea is to give persecuted minorities shelter in India as Indian citizens, then why confine it to only 3 countries in your neighborhood? What about the rest of the world? And so on. Having said that, we now have to move to Assam. Assam is a very peculiar case because 1971, India and Pakistan had basically decided that after 1965 war, there'll be no migration. 1971, something happened. 1971 is when Pakistan Army carried out the big crackdown in what was then East Pakistan, and nearly a crore of refugees came into India. In fact, India was under such a burden that Government of India tried desperately to raise resources to look after these refugees. They even issued special postage stamps, which at that point only came at 5 paisa. So everything that is sent by post had to carry that 5 paisa stamp so that that money could go towards refugee relief. Now, when that war ended, India and Mujib signed their accord. Bangladesh was seen as a secular country. So the idea was that all the refugees will go back. And once again, see this where Mrs. Gandhi herself is telling a foreign interviewer that her understanding is and her confidence is that all the refugees will go back. Now, the fact is that a lot of the refugees went back, but a lot did not go back. So say in the border states, particularly in Assam, Tripura also, but in Assam, most of all, a feeling remained that a lot of these refugees stayed back in India because at that point, India was a much more prosperous country compared to East Pakistan, or maybe much less poor country compared to East Pakistan. So they became kind of economic refugees who in the course of time serendipitously acquired Indian citizenship. And now their children, their grandchildren also have acquired Indian citizenship. 50 years is a very long time. If adults came into India from East Pakistan in 1971, even their grandchildren could be voters in India now. So that is what caused a problem, and that is what led to the Assam agitation beginning with 1978-79, which was called the Foreign Nationals Agitation Movement, which said that too many foreigners have come and got voting rights in our state. So we, the ethnic Assamese, have become a minority. That movement went on. It led to massacres, killings, boycotts, big public protests. It was a very popular movement. Peace was restored in normalcy when Rajiv Gandhi and the Assam agitation leaders signed in 1985 accord to settle these disputes, these disagreements, and the movement was withdrawn. The key element in that agreement was that Government of India will hold an NRC process specific to Assam, only in Assam. And then of the people who are identified as foreigners, idea then was that they will be driven back into Bangladesh. Now we know that nobody was ever going to be driven back into Bangladesh. So many creative ideas were debated and discussed, although never put down on paper, basically saying that their voting rights will be taken away. So ethnic Assamese or the native people will not feel threatened or made a minority or be reduced to a minority by these quote-unquote outsiders. That caused a problem. Now, the problem there was when the NRC was carried out in Assam, most people passed the test. Most people had the documents. For about 1.5 to 2 million people did not. And as things worked out, nearly 2/3 of them, if not more, were not Muslims. They were Hindus, Buddhists, Nepalis. Now, what do you do with them, or tribals? Did you want to drive them out also? Definitely the BJP government did not want to drive them out. So how do you find a solution so you could apply a filter, and a filter through which all the Muslims will pass, but the rest will be retained. So what is retained has value, gets citizenship. What passes the filter then is declared foreign citizen. So this law in that case has a specific implication in Assam. So why have the people of Assam been protesting? And why are they in Supreme Court now? They are protesting because they did not have a problem particularly with Muslim immigrants. They had a problem with all Bengali-speaking immigrants because they were protecting their ethnic, linguistic, and cultural identity. So that's one more complexity in this situation. Once again, to try and understand this, I will use my favorite example. The favorite example is imagine a rocket, right? A PSLV, a GSLV. You can put anything on a rocket. So what matters is, what does the rocket carry? The rocket can carry a peaceful load, which is satellites, etc. A rocket can also carry a warlike load, which is called a war load. So if instead of satellites, which do your communication and other stuff, if you put a war load over it, like a bomb, an explosive, nuclear, conventional, whatever, then this same rocket becomes something to worry about. And that's the reason CAA has been dead on arrival, because it's been seen in combination with NRC. And don't blame people for seeing it that way, because just before that, Amit Shah in West Bengal had made this statement. Please watch it for just a couple of seconds.
मैं आज कहना चाहता हूं, भारतीय जनता पार्टी की सरकार एनआरसी के पहले सिटीजनशिप अमेंडमेंट बिल लेकर आनी है, सीए भी लेकर आनी है.
So, as this statement by Amit Shah showed, people got worried that now there'll be an NRC process like Assam carried out elsewhere in the country, and then every Muslim will be on test. Later, the Prime Minister tried to allay these fears in his speech in Ramlila ground in Delhi, because a lot of the pushback came also from Gulf countries, his friendships in Islamic world, and also it was difficult to justify that legally, constitutionally, even morally, to the extent that moral issues matter anymore. So in spite of that, doubts haven't quite died out in this case, because faith was lost to begin with in the process. So intentions of the government have been suspected from day one.